It's Victor Purton here for the Australian Leadership Project. Today we're honoured to be joined by Craig Ritchie, the CEO of the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. Tell me, what do you see as unique around Australian leadership?
Look, I think the first thing that strikes me as unique about Australian leadership is its utter intolerance of pomposity, and that I think comes from our egalitarian ethos that I think is deeply embedded and perhaps hardwired into the Australian psyche. Former ambassador of Australia to the US recently described Australians as having fairness hardwired into our national psyche, and that obviously has some connections to a style of leadership that is about bringing people together, less about position, more about influence and impact, and equally the importance that we place on making sure that we bring out the best in others.
What do you think Australians want of their leaders today?
So I think they want vision, but I don't think they want vision in the grand salesman or heroic model of leadership. I think they want somebody with a sense of the common good, a sense of where are we going, and then an ability to gather people. I actually think of leadership less as the qualities possessed by particular individuals and more of an emergent quality of the interaction between people who collaborate with one another to achieve a common goal.
Share your favourite story of Australian leadership.
So my favourite story of Australian leadership is a bit of an odd one, actually. I have close friends in Newcastle who are Italian migrants. They came out after the war, after the Second World War, and the head of this family, if you like, the father, just turned 93 about a week ago. And is he a spectacular man? Is he a showy man? Does he occupy high office? No, none of that. But he is a man who loves deeply and lives his life out of deep conviction. And he's the kind of guy that when on that sad day arrives, you might go to his funeral and I'd be asked to say something about him. You would talk about his generosity and his fierce determination to do what was right, or at least what he understood to be right. A man deeply committed to his family and his community, and to me, I would hold this man up as an example of the kind of leader perhaps that I would like to be, or the kind of things I would like people to say about me when I finally pass on.
Your favourite stories of contemporary Indigenous leadership in Australia?
So I want to talk about a woman that's well known, both in Indigenous Australia and beyond, and that's a woman named Pat Anderson. Pat Anderson's currently the co-chair of the Referendum Council that's leading the discussions about constitutional reform. She's a favourite leader of mine. I worked for Pat once. And again, she embodies a kind of leadership that is much less about her and her position as it is about what is it we're trying to achieve, how can we all put our shoulder to the wheel, but recognises that there's a deep diversity and all of us have different skills and different talents and different capabilities, different interests. But if we can just deploy all of those and apply them to the challenge that's in front of us, then we're able to achieve great things. And I see that in her leadership around the constitutional reform agenda, but I've actually seen it over many, many years, almost 20 years that we've known one another. And I think she's a terrific example. One other person that I'll mention is a young man young Aboriginal lawyer from Sydney. Jeffrey Winters is his name. And the thing that I admire about Jeffrey's leadership, although it's sometimes a challenge, is that he is all go, full of passion, full of drive, and is at 110%. And that's both challenging and inspiring, and at all times tiring. But it inspires me because our future is in great hands. So another example, and this is smacks of bias, and that is, I look at my children, 3 young Aboriginal people. My daughter, as I watch her raise our first grandchild, in spectacular fashion, full of love, full of drive and vision, not seeking limelight, but just doing the things that need to be done. My 2 boys, my middle child, eldest son, about to graduate in law, only interested in wanting to make the world a better place. And then my youngest son, who will follow me, become a school teacher, particularly of English and history, and his deep love of the story of the world, and every day they inspire me with the way that they lead, because we taught them from a young age that leadership was not about position, it's about influence. And to have influence, you've got to build good relationships, you've got to be a good person. And I watch in awe at how they're growing into being great people.
So tell us about your leadership journey.
So right now I'm the Chief Executive of the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. So that's a national Indigenous research collecting institution focused on telling the story of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australia. But I come from a small rural town in New South Wales. I'm the child of an Aboriginal man and a non-Aboriginal woman who met and formed a family in the 1960s in, as I say, a small town in the middle of New South Wales. And I reflect now how challenging that must have been in that social environment. But I ask myself occasionally, and I sort of wonder, how does a boy from rural New South Wales end up being the head of a Commonwealth cultural institution? And it's been an interesting journey, and the thing that I've learnt about it is that opportunities will arise, sometimes at moments when they're not the most opportune. At least you think they're not the most opportune. And so I've learned to take the chance of the opportunity when it arises. So I went to university, first in my family, to do that. Only Aboriginal student in my graduating class, the University of Newcastle, back in the 80s. And then just took the opportunity that arose as they came along. Through Aboriginal health after I quit teaching, and then from Gilgandra to Newcastle to Canberra. The really important thing about that journey is the people. I tend to live my life on the basis, sounds a bit odd, of an old Hebrew proverb that says a man's gift will make room for him and bring him before great people. So I've always looked to what's the contribution. My gift is the contribution that I can make. And so I focus on what is it I can do. And the upshot of that is that I've had the fortunate experience of seeing myself come into relationship and encounters with great people. All of our, and this is a peculiarly Australian facet of what understanding of leadership is, that none of us do it on our own. We all have people around us that help us, and so that's been my story. And I look back and kind of go, wow, tomorrow I'm going to lunch with the Prime Minister. That's a long way. from riding horses in rural New South Wales as a young fella. But it's a great journey.
Well, that's a big thank you from the Australian Leadership Project to Craig Ritchie, who joined us in Melbourne, doing a fabulous job in this wonderful institution, and we wish him all the best. If you'd like to share your stories of Australian leadership, please go to www.australianleadership.com, where you will find a wealth of material and the opportunity to share your story as well.